Hey students, Mr. Young here. Welcome to Chapter 10, Lesson 1. So I know I really talked up the action in my Chapter 10 intro video, but if there's one word I could use to describe Lesson 1 of Chapter 10, it's bitter. We started this chapter with the election of 1800, and now I know that everyone thinks that modern presidential elections are brutal, but even as far as 200 years ago, they got personal. Jump to the next page. We'll get started. So President John Adams ran for re-election in 1800. Remember, he was a Federalist. His VP was Charles Pinckney. The Democratic Republicans ran Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. The campaign was interesting in that neither Jefferson or Adams traveled the country to gain support. They sent out publications to newspapers so that people would know their policies and stances. It got dirty with personal attacks on both sides. The Federalists said Jefferson was godless, and the Republicans said the Federalists were trying to turn the USA into a monarchy. So here's how it panned out. At the time, they still picked VPs, vice presidents, by whoever won second place in the election. Well, the Republicans won first and second place. In fact, they tied. Jefferson and his other Democratic Republican, Aaron Burr, had 73 electoral votes each. In a tie, you may remember that the House of Representatives decides who wins. Despite some Federalist shenanigans that were involved in this House of Representatives tiebreaker, Thomas Jefferson ended up winning. On the day of his inauguration, Jefferson walked over to the Senate to do his speech in his regular, ordinary clothes. He wasn't all about that pomp. He was not a fancy man, and he believed to keep things simple, and government should be simple too, especially federal government. He believed in limited government, and in his speech he said he would support states' rights and believed in wise and frugal government, basically not spending a lot of money. The former president, John Adams, did not attend. Bitter. Let's talk about the Jefferson presidency. Jefferson immediately went about shrinking the federal government. He reduced the national debt and reduced military spending. He cut government workers down to a few hundred, and he got rid of most federal taxes. He kept customs duties, which are basically taxes on imported goods. In your textbook it says he pretty much expected the federal government to run on the funds they collected from import duties and selling land in the Western territories. So after John Adams lost the election in 1800, but before Jefferson took office, so like the time between the election and inauguration, Adams pulled what I called some political spite wizardry. He set up this new court system. It's a job. They were setting up the new court system, and he appointed hundreds of positions. And of course, he filled them up with Federalists. He appointed a pretty staunch Federalist by the name of John Marshall as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Adams did this basically in spite of Jefferson. To spite Jefferson and hand him a court full of Federalists, which we know would be a problem because we learned about checks and balances. So now you have a Democratic-Republican president. I believe they won a lot of House seats too, perhaps a majority in the Congress, but with all those appointed positions in the court, that means the whole judicial branch is now filled with Federalists, which could stymie stuff that Jackson wants to do, or rather Jefferson wanted to do. Jefferson was not pleased by this. By the time he assumed office, however, some of these commissions, which is like the official paperwork for these appointed positions, hadn't gone through yet. They'd not yet been delivered. And so he told his Secretary of State, James Madison, he said, hey, these commissions that haven't been delivered yet, don't deliver them. One of these fellows that thought he was going to land a sweet government job was William Marbury. He did not receive his commission. He ended up taking this to court. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the SCOTUS, which is the Supreme Court of the United States, said, no can do. We can't force them to deliver this commission. It's not something That's within our power to do. It's not within our jurisdiction. This case was known as Marbury versus Madison. And even though Marbury didn't get his government job, the Marbury versus Madison decision had far-reaching implications. John Marshall basically decided this is where judicial review came from. It came out of this case. John Marshall said, all right, so we have all these decisions to make. There's this complication, here's what we get out of this. We now have the power to declare acts of the president or of Congress unconstitutional. That's where it all came from, Marbury versus Madison. Some technical legal stuff that we're not going to get into because we're in 8th grade. It also established the Constitution as the supreme law of the land, so no laws can supersede the Constitution, no state laws. Chief Justice Marshall served 24 years in the Supreme Court, and in this time made decisions that continued to broaden powers of the court. They're mentioned sort of in the end of the lesson here, at the end of Chapter 10, Lesson 1, things like McCulloch versus Maryland, which was about implied powers. Gibbons versus Ogden said that the Supreme Court and federal law can overrule state laws, things like that. So he worked to increase the power of the court. So this one was a little shorter, but very politically centered. You have a quiz. It's only 4 questions, so 8 points on the next page. Go ahead and knock it out. In the next lesson, we get into things a little more exciting. We get into things like Lewis and Clark, some foreign policy relation problems. Oh, and Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr duel. And hint, one of them dies. Okay. That's it for today. Have a wonderful day. Let me know if you have any questions.